by herself. Go.
You know, I wish I had my Nancy Grace updo on because it was a bombshell today. It was closing arguments and lots of rulings, and this is what ABC has to say about it.
A teenager is dead.
Closing arguments now underway in the George Zimmerman murder trial. The state making a final effort to convince the jury that Zimmerman shot and killed Trayvon Martin because he wanted to.
Why does this defendant get out of the car if he thinks that Trayvon Martin is a threat to him? Why? Why? Because he's got a gun.
Prosecutor Bernie Della Rianda trying to pull at the heartstrings of the 6 women who will decide Zimmerman's fate.
This is one of the last photos that will ever be taken of Trayvon Martin. Because of the actions of one individual, the defendant, George Zimmerman.
The defense maintains that Zimmerman acted in self-defense and will try to get the jury to acquit and leave this courtroom believing Zimmerman killed Martin because he was being attacked, was badly hurt, and had to shoot. Zimmerman has pleaded not guilty to second-degree murder, but the jury will now have another option to convict him of manslaughter. The hearing over whether or not to allow the jury to consider lesser charges heated this morning when the prosecution requested the addition of a third-degree murder charge, basing it on the claim that Zimmerman committed child abuse by killing a 17-year-old. The judge denying the motion after the defense fiercely fought back.
Just when I thought this case couldn't get any more bizarre, the state is seeking third-degree murder based on child abuse?
Knock, knock, who's there? All right, no, that was another. All right.
Opening.
Yes. Now, look, I have a definitive thought on which way this trial should go. We're going to get to that in a little bit. As Robin gives us more of the evidence, I want you to meet the jury. The Young Turks jury, if you will. Anna Kasparian's here, Hermela Aragawi, and Logan Pollard. You'll be with us throughout the show. That's our panel, of course.
And by the way, we are 4 women, and that jury is 6 women, so we're very representative of the
There
real
you
jury.
go. All right. Look at Charlie's Angels here, or Jenks Angels.
That's right.
All right, Robin, give us more.
Okay, so this case today, that you actually will have heard, if you listened to it every word like I did, that the prosecution has said, you may not decide this case based on passion or prejudice, but that's exactly what this case was all filled about, especially in closing arguments today. And just to get a sense, take a look at some of the slides that the prosecution put up. Particularly, let's look at A8 first, which is the slide that the prosecution put up saying how many arms did Trayvon Martin need, and basically equating Trayvon Martin to an octopus, trying to show him that he couldn't have possibly done all these things at the same time. He would have had a punch, move to the sidewalk, grabbing his head, smothering the mouth and nose, grabbing for the gun, all of that at the same time, really trying to give the jury an image of what Trayvon Martin was going through that day. And then the final slide that they put up in their closing argument was so powerful. It was a picture, in lieu of using a picture of George Zimmerman to the left and Trayvon Martin to the right, they put a picture of the gun, the weapon, and of course the soda can or the watermelon fruit drink that was there, with the description underneath the picture of the gun being the 28-year-old neighbor watchman, criminal justice major, 40-pound advantage, aspiring marshal, police ride-along applicant, concealed firearm, permit holder, armed, practice shooter, long-term resident who followed. Then they put on the other side, 3 weeks past, 17-year-old from out of town who ran. And that was how the day ended.
So as I look at that, I love that last slide, because the thing that just keeps going around and around in my mind is who pursued and who ran, right? I mean, it's not like Trayvon pursued Zimmerman. You can say that at some point there was a fight. You can say it's not clear who started the fight after Zimmerman pursued him. But you can't say that Martin was stalking Zimmerman. You just can't say it. So to me, if I'm on the jury, I'd be like, look, put all the semantics aside. Zimmerman started it. And the only defense that Zimmerman has is, well, I shot him to death, so he can't testify here. So I'll tell you that after I was chasing after him, at some point, he started pursuing me, which if I was on the jury, I'd be thinking, BS, 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 BS. I don't believe that for a second.
Okay, I'm going to play a little devil's advocate.
Yes,
with you here. Okay. What penal code section is following a crime in? It's not a crime.
No, it's hard to. So it's hard to claim self-defense if you're the aggressor.
Right.
So if I pursue you down into the parking lot and I'm chasing you, and then at some point you stop and you turn around and I shoot you, we get into a fight, I shoot you. It's hard for me to say, well, at some point she turned around and she slapped me. Can you believe that? So I shot her in the chest. Well, I was chasing your ass in the parking lot.
My question, my thing is, like, so if someone comes behind me 100 feet and I turn around and I basically lunge at them because I feel like my life is in danger, like maybe Trayvon Martin did, just because I pursued them a little bit at the end to defend myself. I just don't understand how Zimmerman is really getting off on this one.
Okay, but let's think about this for a second. You're the neighborhood watch guy, okay?
And he's not
Self-appointed.
he never had that title.
At least people in the community treated him that way. I mean, you had the woman testify that
just because he had a gun.
that she thought that he was the neighborhood watch guy. And wouldn't you hope that your neighborhood watch guy would keep an eye on the person that they thought was suspicious?
But the cops say don't follow.
From his
Just
car.
taking this in another direction, though. I mean, if you even look at the physicality of Zimmerman, I mean, he's a big guy. So, I mean, that speaks more to me, more words to me than just seeing his physical space and that young teenager. I mean,
Because
it's
you'd
just,
be scared because if
but,
this
I mean,
guy's
he's a
following
big-
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's an interesting part of this. You know, they brought on his MMA trainer. I thought this was the best part of the case. I thought it was honestly, I mean, in the midst of an incredibly serious case, very funny because the MMA trainer is like, you don't understand how soft Zimmerman was. I'm going to clean this up just a tiny bit, but it's basically the wussy defense. Like, our client is such a sissy, such a wussy, that I mean, like, obviously he'd get his ass kicked by anybody. He's the softest guy alive. I mean, it's a hilarious case for his side to put on.
That wussy had a gun. That wussy had a gun. That's the difference.
That's right.
That's what made him super bold. I don't care how sweet of a guy this is. Because he had a gun, he felt a little bit more brave and could follow Trayvon, and that's exactly what he did.
At least you're consistent. I have to give you credit for that because you're the one person who has stayed here, who is sitting here on television back when this crime occurred in February 2012 and has maintained your point of view. I'll tell you what my beef is. I'm sitting here watching all these pundits who are really the wusses out there who have not been brave enough to say what they really think about the case. They keep going and changing with the current of whatever they think the acceptable thing is to be. I mean, you've been consistent in terms of where you stand, so I'll give you that.
You know, one last piece of evidence, and then I'm going to have everybody vote. Okay, I know it's ridiculous, and the defense is not presented yet. At least their closing
But
argument.
it's not evidence. Closing is
Close,
just argument.
I know, but you know you want to hear them out. But nonetheless, we don't have a show tomorrow, so we're going to vote today. Okay, one last thing. He says, he was smothering my mouth, and I was afraid of suffocation, etc., my mouth and my nose. And he says, I'm the one that was screaming. Which one is it? Okay, your mouth was closed, but you were screaming. So there's a lot of issues with what Zimmerman says, but nonetheless, it's a hard case to prove. Robin's been saying that throughout, right?
Yes.
And there's a very good point there. And I think a lot of the people who are experts in the field go, beyond a reasonable doubt, we weren't there, and Trayvon tragically is dead, but he's not here to testify. How are you going to disprove what Zimmerman is saying? So if you were on the jury, now, of course, we're not on the jury, and I want to make this very clear to the audience and everybody else. Look, let the jury decide. Okay, we don't have all the evidence. We weren't there every second. We weren't there every minute. And if the jury votes in a way other than mine, I say, okay, well, that's the jury system. Okay.
Are you giving us manslaughter too, just out of curiosity? Because I know that some of you guys are going to want to split
Murder,
babies.
manslaughter, not guilty. Go.
Definitely guilty. I would say guilty. And the reason why I say that is because I'm basing it on the evidence that's been presented and also what his character was. He was obsessed with being a cop. He was obsessed with law and order. He failed to be a cop, and as a result, he wanted to be neighborhood watch. And this was his way of, carrying out some form of justice. He was drunk off his own power, and that's why this happened.
So murder, not manslaughter.
What's the strongest
I
piece
would
of
go with
evidence,
murder.
though? That's what I want. What is the evidence in your mind?
The strongest piece of evidence for me is the fact that there was a professional who testified and said that his injuries were insignificant. And that was a big thing for me, because if you are trying to defend yourself and your injuries are insignificant and you're dealing with a 17-year-old boy, at that point you're a boy, you're not even an adult yet. I don't believe for a second that this was self-defense. He had no weapon. He alleged that Trayvon Martin grabbed the gun in one occasion. There was no DNA of Trayvon Martin on that gun. So I don't believe him for a second. I think he's a liar.
I think for me, the most significant evidence is that he followed him at the request of the 911 operator saying, do not follow him. Because I think once they come in contact, it's really hard to say, well, did he really think he was going to get punched so hard that he was going to die? I think it all really comes down to before the altercation. For me, I know as a jury, you're not supposed to decide based on how much time they get, but it does matter. I don't know how much you'd get for third-degree murder, Robin. Do you know?
Third degree, they're not allowed to consider. It's 20. He's facing 25 years.
I'd say he deserves a full 25 years.
So murder.
Murder.
I'm saying not guilty.
Not guilty.
I'm saying that the prosecution did not meet their standard of proof. I think that the standard of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. You can't just think he did bad things. I think, and you can't not like him. Character is not enough to convict someone. The prosecution has not been able to prove that he actually intended to prove and cause his death.
I think this sets a very scary precedent, though. I'm afraid that this is going to really embolden many people that do have guns.
On manslaughter, do you need intent to kill? You don't need that, do you?
You don't, but I think that if you believe, so I'm torn on that, actually. I think definitely not guilty on second degree. If you believe the self-defense defense, then it's self-defense applies to anything, even simple battery. So I don't necessarily believe self-defense applies, but I don't think that it is second-degree murder.
Okay.
Manslaughter.
All right, so you're on the fence on manslaughter, but you're voting not guilty overall. Logan.
Cenk, you're not going to like this, but I really don't want to. I don't want to say guilty or not. I think that we need to let the jury do their work.
Okay,
and,
if I was a foreman, I'd browbeat you.
Yeah, same here.
No.
All right, we have an abstention. Fair enough.
Everybody's causing a new trial.
Oh, the jury's hung. We've got to come back and do it again. Nancy Grace is thinking, yes, do that. No, the correct answer, everybody, is manslaughter. It's manslaughter. It's too hard to prove second-degree murder. It's too hard to prove intent, that he intended to kill him, right? Beyond a reasonable doubt, I'm not beyond a reasonable doubt on that. At the same time, he pursued, he had the gun, he started it, and Trayvon Martin would be alive if Zimmerman had not pursued him. He caused a situation that led to a manslaughter. I think it's clearly manslaughter.
How much time do you get for manslaughter, do you know?
You can get up to 30 years.
Okay.
Now, you're not going to.
Although I've heard that this judge is pretty harsh, and and a couple of people who've actually been in her courtroom have said that if this was a bench trial, meaning that there was no jury, that she would have convicted him of second-degree murder. That would have been their prediction.
Oh, their prediction, but
yes,
of course, she didn't say that. All right, do we have time for the cop?
Yeah, well, yeah.
So do that real quick.
Okay, so last night on CNN, the ex-police chief, the one who actually resigned himself, did an interview with CNN. Here it is. It's very interesting.
Is it fair to say that the investigative process, in a way, got hijacked?
Yes, in a number of ways.
What do you mean?
That investigation was taken away from us. We weren't able to complete it. And it was transferred to another district or a different state attorney. So, and that outside influence changed the course of the way the criminal justice process should work.
Here's what bothered me about that CNN interview. He comes off as like, I did something out of principle, even though there was a lot of pressure. But dude, why did you do a toxicology report on a kid who got shot and not on the guy who shot him? Why did you do a criminal background check on the kid who got shot and not the guy who shot him? So it's easy to say, I did not bend to public pressure, but you also did a horrible job in investigating the case. So I think they let him off the hook a little bit. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about civil liberties, and Oliver Stone has a very interesting point to make about that, comparing Watergate to what's happening now. Be right.
It would have been a scandal. If you lived through Watergate, if you read the Church Committee reports, you know the costs of unchecked government.